All right, I know it is a lot later than I promised, but here is the promised video on some of the calculations similar to what you're likely to see on the AP exam. So these are all questions from AP Classroom. Hopefully they are questions that we have not covered in class, so that way this will be useful and a little different than what you've already done. So this is a populations math question, but it's also talking about percent change. So it shows sorry, I'm going to go for a highlighter here. It shows a chart that shows the population of Charlottesville, North Carolina from 2013 to 2019. So it shows the increase in population size. And the first thing we're supposed to do is calculate a percent change. And as always, you have to show your work. Remember, you're not going to get credit if you don't show your work. Also, remember when possible to include units, because without units, you risk not earning credit for answers or for showing your work. So to calculate a percent change, what you need to do, so there's percent change, is going to be the change, in this case in population, over the original value. So since we're doing this from 2013 to 2019, that would be our population in 2013 times 100%. So if we plug things in, what is the change in our population? Well, it's going to be 857,425 people minus the original population, which is 757,278. All of that divided by the original population, which is the population in 2013, which I'm just going to cross that out, which is 757,278. And then you're going to multiply that by 100%. Now, in the interest of saving time, I have already done all these calculations, so you can pause this video and break out a calculator and do them yourself. This ends up working out to 100,147 divided by 757,278. You could put people, but for a population, I don't think since it's going to end up a percent, I don't think it's going to end up being as big a deal if we don't have the unit. Now, also keep in mind that you don't have to put every single step that I'm putting. You could probably put this and then your answer, and you would be done. But I put extra stuff in because I'm explaining and I don't want people to get lost. And then your final answer is going to be about 13.2%. But as I've said in the past, they tend to accept ranges, so you could probably get away with rounding to 13%. So the next part of this question, and notice that we started with part C because I skipped every part of the questions. That is not a math-based question. So it tells us that in 2019, we had a growth rate in Charlotte, and I'm trying to get the highlighter, there we go, of 1.88%, and we need to calculate the year when the population of Charlotte will double, assuming that the growth rate stays the same. Now, this should take you to the doubling time population. So doubling time, which I am putting as dt, equals, and this you have to memorize because you're not going to be given this on the test, 70 divided by r, where r is your growth rate expressed as a percent. So it's going to be 1.88, not 0.0188. You are not using the decimal version of your growth rate, you're using the percent version. So when you plug this in, all you really have to do is you have to say, okay, 70 divided by 1.88, that equals about 37 years. Remember, I said I've already done this math, but then notice it doesn't ask you how many years it will take for the population to double. It asks you what is the year when the population doubles. And I'll admit, when I first went through this and was doing the math, I would have gotten this wrong because I just calculated doubling time. Instead, what you need to do is you need to add this to the year 2019 because it's 37 years after 2019, which is going to give you 2056 as your answer of the year in which Charlotte's population will double. All right, and now we're switching gears. Now we're talking about how much water is being used. So they give us some things that they like a conversion factor basically, which is 90 gallons of water per day. And note that this is all per person. And we are looking for the number of gallons used by the population of Charlotte in the year 2018, which means we're going to be using this as our population. So we have 841,611 people, each of which uses 90 gallons per day. Now, when we multiply that, we're going to end up with how much the population of Charlotte uses per day. But we need to do this for the entire year. So what we need to do is convert this from days to years. So we use another conversion factor of 365 days per year. What that'll do is allow me to cancel out my days, and then all I have to do is I have to basically multiply this out, and I end up with an answer in gallons per year, and we're looking at a particular year. Now, I've started doing things in scientific notation just because it made the math easier. So if you know anything about scientific notation, it's 2.76 times 10 to the 10th gallons. Now, I'm lazy. I don't like writing all the zeros, but can you do this without writing it in scientific notation? Yes. It's going to be about 27 billion, 600 million. 3, 4, 5, 6. No, that's trillion. No. So this is basically to calculate or convert to scientific notation. You take your number and you want to put, and yes, that's my messed up zeros, you want to put a decimal point after the first non-zero digit. So you would basically want to turn this into 2.76 times 10 to the something power. The something power in this case would be however many times you need to move the decimal point to put it between that 2 and that 7. So you'd move it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. And I basically did that in reverse when I was writing the answer for you. So this is how many gallons you have. Sorry, there's some insect trying to fly into my mouth because apparently it has tired of its insect life. So either of those would be acceptable as an answer. So if you happen to be proficient in scientific notation and want to use it, feel free. But I know most of you aren't. So let's go to the next question that I wanted to go over with y'all. All right, so for quite a few years, they would have a lot of these kind of power plant calculations where you get information about, oh, okay, so this power plant makes this many kilowatt hours, that's how much heat you need, and then you had to start calculating some things. So we're going to go ahead and do this. So they want us to calculate a variety of things. In this case, they want us to calculate the BTUs of heat needed to generate the electricity produced each day. They tell us that it's 12 million kilowatt hours, and that's per day. And remember, we want our answer for one day. All right, but we want to know how much electricity, how much heat we need to produce 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. Oh no, sorry, that's how much we have for 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. My bad. All right, so that tells us that we have a conversion factor of 10,000 BTUs for every kilowatt hour of electricity. Now, if we multiplied this, that would give us BTUs per day, and that happens to be the unit that we want, BTUs of heat per day. So what we would have to do is multiply this out, and that is going to be, I'm going to put this down in scientific notation, mostly because I hate writing all those zeros, but I'm going to write it in non-scientific notation as well. So 1.2 times 10 to the 11th BTUs per day. So that would be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, and I believe it's 120 trillion. Yeah, BTUs per day. The reason I don't like writing all of the zeros is just because you can lose track. But what you really want to do is include those commas because that helps you keep track of, oh, okay, I have 3 zeros here, 6, 9, because let's say I wrote this. It's really easy to lose track of the number of zeros I have. And so if I, instead of writing this answer, which if I put my commas in, is going to be the correct answer, if instead I did this, and if I put the zeros in, I would see, oh wait, my bad. Let's say I did this. So that would be an extra zero. That would lose me the point. So it's very important to keep track of your zeros when you're writing them out. Otherwise, you run the risk of losing your credit. And remember, you want to earn your points. You earn 1 point for showing your work and 1 point for your answer. So in this case, that would be this stuff. This would give you your full credit. Now, this is from an older FRQ where you would get a point for showing your work and a separate point for your answer. However, that is not necessarily what you'll see on the AP test now. You might just get a point for the correct answer if you've shown your work. Also, keep in mind, you got to have the units. You don't necessarily have to do the per day, but you definitely have to have the BTUs. Without the BTUs, you don't get credit. All right, so the next question is asking now how many pounds of coal are going to be consumed by the power plant, and they give us more information. 1 pound of coal yields 5,000 BTUs of heat. So it's another conversion factor for us to use. So we have a number of BTUs that we produce, and that is, and like I said, I like me some scientific notation because I'm lazy. So that's how many BTUs are produced per day or are needed per day. And then we've got a conversion factor, 1 pound of coal. And I'm weird, I write my pounds in slightly cursive, so I don't get that L mixed up with my numbers. So 1 pound of coal is going to give us 5,000 BTUs of heat. My BTUs cancel out. I'm going to get an answer in pounds of coal per day, which is exactly what I'm being asked for. And my answer ends up being 2.4 times 10 to the 7th pounds of coal per day, which is going to be 24 million, I believe. Yes, that's a million. All right, so there's your answer. Either of those two, in scientific notation or not in scientific notation, would earn you the point, as long as you've got your units. So that would be just pounds of coal would be fine. Then they're asking us another question based on previous information. Now, here's a situation that I want to talk about. Let's say you got this wrong. And let's say that instead of putting the correct answer, you ended up putting like 3,200 pounds of coal. You like went really crazy wrong. What you could do is for the next question, it's a fairly simple calculation. Let's look at it. You want to calculate the pounds of sulfur released by the power plant each day, assuming that the coal contains 1% sulfur by weight. What you're basically going to be doing is you are going to be taking the number of pounds of coal that was produced. So that's going to be that 2.4 times 10 to the 7th pounds of coal. And you're going to be multiplying it by 1%, which is in your calculator the same thing as multiplying it by 0.01. So remember, percents and your calculators that I'm going to be giving you, I wouldn't mess with the percent button even if there is one. All right, now the correct answer is going to be 2.4 times 10 to the 5th pounds, in this case of sulfur, which is also, let's see, I think 240,000, pounds of sulfur. But let's say that you made a mistake in the previous slide. And like I said, or you want to say, I don't know the answer, I'm going to say if it's 3,200 pounds of coal, then 3,200 pounds times 1% would be, let's see, 32 pounds of sulfur. Now, my numbers are wrong because I got the previous question wrong, but I was able to show that I know how to do this calculation. And so if I have a wrong number, let's say I got something wrong just by a simple math error on the previous part, I could still earn points for the next parts just by doing my math correctly. So that's something to keep in mind because if you don't know how to do one part of a question, you can still get points for later parts, even if you need the answers from a previous part to do the next parts. So we're going to ignore that 3,200 and 32 pounds of sulfur from now on because that was just an example. And instead now, we're going to go to our next part. So our next question is now talking about this coal-fired power plant. And we're looking at the fact that there are standards that only 1.2 pounds of sulfur can be emitted per million BTUs of heat generated. So using the results that we've got in Part A, we need to determine whether the power plant meets the standards for the EPA. So for that, what we need to do is we basically, got to figure out how many millions of pounds, how many millions of BTUs we generate. And so we had 1.2 times 10 to the 11th BTUs needed. And if I convert that to millions, that becomes 1.2 times 10 to the 5th million BTUs. Why am I saying that? Because remember, our standard is per million BTUs. So we're going to need to use that as kind of a unit. If I'm doing this, just writing it out, that would be 120,000 million BTUs. I know that's really unwieldy, but don't worry. We're going to be getting rid of that. Now, what we need to do is we need to take the pounds of sulfur that we calculated in the previous question and figure out how many pounds of sulfur we're producing per million BTU. So we are producing basically 240,000 pounds of sulfur, right? Now, if we divide that by the number of million BTUs that's generated, we actually find out when we divide this out, that's 2 pounds of sulfur per million BTUs. But that's not our answer yet. We need to determine whether the power plant meets the EPA standard. The EPA standard is 1.2 pounds of sulfur per million BTUs. So we have to say the power plant does not meet the standard. Now, does this mean that I could have just written the power plant doesn't meet the standard without doing any of the math? Not if I wanted to earn the point. You have to have the calculations in order to earn the point. So just keep that in mind, that sometimes you're going to have to write out a conclusion based on the information you've got. All right, I think this is the last one that we are going to do. Nope, got one more after this. All right, so let's get to it. So, particulate matter is another common pollutant in vehicles, basically particles. It comes from coal-fired power plants and various sources. There's a specific size, PM 2.5, and what that means is that it's a certain diameter of particle. So it's really tiny. It's probably got like a 2.5 micrometer or something like that diameter, which means it's super tiny. It can get into your lungs, and it presents a particular risk to human health. We've got some atmospheric concentrations of particulate matter in a particular city in 1990 and then again in 2016. And we need to calculate, again, the percent change from 1990 to 2016. So very similar to that first question. So again, remember, it's the difference, which would be what we got in 2016, which is our 188. And you can put micrograms per meters cubed if you want to be certain you get points, minus our initial, which is 85 micrograms per meters cubed, divided by our initial value, which is the 1990 value of 85 micrograms per meters cubed. Now, when you multiply things, when you subtract things out and you divide things out, you're going to end up getting the micrograms per meters cubed is going to cancel out. And remember, you're going to take this and multiply it by 100% because they want a percent change. When you divide that out, that gives you approximately 121%. If you gave an answer of 1.21 and forgot to multiply by 100%, you would get it wrong. So just keep in mind, if they ask for a percent, give them a percent. And yes, you do have to do the math because you have to show your work. It says it on the problem. All right, now it's saying that trees can remove this PM 2.5 from the atmosphere when particulates settle on the leaves and are washed onto the soil. And they give you a figure that the trees are removing approximately 2.3 kilograms per hectare of forest. Hectare is a unit of area, it's just metric system, but notice you don't need to actually know how big a hectare is to answer this. So they want you to calculate the decrease in particulate matter removal in kilograms if logging reduced a forested area from 50,000 hectares to 43,000. So how many hectares are we missing? Well, it's going to be 50,000 minus, and we can just do 43,000 down here. And these are all hectares. And then we subtract, and that's going to give us 7,000 hectares, right? So we are calculating how much less or how many less kilograms are being removed. So what we're basically going to do is take this 7,000 hectares and we're going to multiply it by that conversion factor we were given, 2.3 kilograms per hectare. Hectares cancel out. I'm left with the unit of kilograms, which is what I want, which is showing me that, okay, my math is right. So that's 16,100 kilograms that's being removed. All right. The next one is a little tougher. It gets a little weird. So let's just get to it. So research has shown that we have an increase in health problems. It increases 1% with every 10% increase in the particulate matter concentration. A city experienced a 23% increase in concentration and had 7,390 hospital admissions for that health problem in a 1-year period. We want to calculate the anticipated increase in the number of hospital admissions during the next year if the particulate matter concentration continues to rise at an identical rate. So I like to write my givens out so I know some things. So 1% increase in health condition goes with a 10% increase in PM 2.5 concentration, right? There is a 23% increase in PM 2.5 concentration. So what I basically did is I said, okay, I want to know I basically took my 23% increase in PM 2.5 concentration, and I divided it by that 10% that I'm comparing to. And I said, okay, I have 2.3 times the increase in PM 2.5. That means I can go back and I can take this 2.3 and I can apply it here and say, okay, that means I'm going to have 1% times 2.3. I'm going to have 2.3% increase in cardiovascular problems. All right, so to find my 2.3%, what I'm going to do is take the number I had of cardiovascular issues in the previous year, which was 7,390, and I'm going to multiply it by 2.3%. Again, remember, in your calculator, that'll be times 0.023. And when you do that, you basically get like 169.9. On the question, on the answer, on the scoring guide, so I rounded because you can't technically have 0.9 of a person being admitted to the hospital. So I said it would be 170 more admissions. But it would actually accept on the scoring guide if you just put 169 more admissions because, technically you don't have that last admission. It's, a statistical thing anyway. All right, this is our final question. This one was an actual FRQ back when I used to teach AP Environmental Science before. When we looked at it after we finished the test and were able to look at FRQs, it took us a while. This one, for some reason, was a little more difficult for me. But now it seems so easy in retrospect. So we're looking at coral, and we're looking at the fact that they have to include calcium carbonate into their shells. It's going to talk about pH in the rest of the question. What we're mostly focusing on is these numbers we're given. So they give us some assumptions, some simplified assumptions in this table for us to use. And we're going to calculate the annual global increase in volume in meters cubed of calcium carbonate in coral reefs. And we have to show our work. All right. So here's what we need to do first. We've got all of these numbers, 2.5 times 10 to the 11th meters squared. That is the area of coral reef that I have. Now, we are having growth in our corals 3 millimeters a year. So that means in a year, I would add 3 millimeters to this. If I take my 2.5 times 10 to the 11th meter squared and I multiplied it by my 3 millimeters, that would basically give me a volume. And that would be the volume in meters cubed of my increase in coral. But notice I've got a unit in millimeters and another unit in meters, and I need to have my answer in meters cubed. So what I need to do is I need to convert 3 millimeters into meters. That's going to be A millimeter is 1,000th of a meter, so that's going to mean that this is 0.003 millimeters. So I need to calculate that volume. So that's 2.5 times 10 to the 11th meters squared times 0.003 meters. That's going to give me an answer in meters cubed, which is what I want. And that answer is 7.5 times 10 to the 8th meters cubed. I believe, hold on a sec. Yeah, I made a boo-boo here. What was this was supposed to be? This was actually supposed to be calculating the increase in volume of the coral. So this was actually our answer. This was what we were supposed to get. And then this was the question that I accidentally copied and pasted twice. So need to calculate the current annual global increase in mass in kilograms of CaCO3. We have our number from the previous calculation, which was 7.5 times 10 to the 8th meters cubed new coral. That's what we added in a year. All right. Now we need to find out how much of that is going to be calcium carbonate. All right. We basically have our conversion factor here. So what we could do, let's see what happens if we multiply these numbers, okay? Times 2 times 10 to the 3rd kilograms over meters cubed. Well, meters cubed and meters cubed cancels out. So then I can go ahead and multiply these numbers. Oh, and by the way, I know I skipped away from the last slide, but it was basically going to be, pretty sure, 750, not 1,000, million. So 750 million meters cubed of coral, if you were writing it out. The ultimate answer here is going to be 1.5 times 10 to the 12th kilograms of calcium carbonate. And if I want to write that out, that's going to be 500, 2, 3, that's 3, 6, 9, 12. And you see why I get lazy about writing out all those zeros. That's how many extra kilograms of calcium carbonate are going to be added. Now, it says, because of ocean acidification, it is expected that in 2050, the mass of calcium carbonate deposited annually in coral reefs will be 20% less than what is currently deposited. We have that number from the previous question, which was 1.5 times 10 to the 12th kilograms of calcium carbonate. That's how much is deposited annually. They want us to calculate how much less calcium carbonate in kilograms will be deposited in 2050 if conditions like ocean water pH stayed the same. So basically, we need to take this number, which is the current rate of the current amount of deposition, and we need to multiply it by 20% because that's how much less will be deposited. When we do that, and remember in your calculator, you're going to multiply it by 0.2. That's going to give you 3 times 10 to the 11th kilograms of calcium carbonate, which is going to be, I believe, 300. Got 9. Okay. So that's 300 trillion less kilograms of calcium carbonate. This is also why I like scientific notation better. I hope that going through some of this math was a little helpful. If it wasn't, then feel free to, come see me after school tomorrow. I will stay as long as you need me to go over stuff. And then remember, all of these questions, I just went over the math part, right? But that's not all there is in the question. There were quite a few other points that you could earn, so don't just skip the entire question just because the math scares you. That's going to do you a disservice. That's going to cost you a lot of points. That could be the difference between you passing and failing the test.